Hey there! So I wanted to do a quick video about the booklets that I've been talking about. I've been telling a lot of people about these because I think they're really just a great way to kind of focus when you're reading. Not so much just, fun storybooks. We don't want to do these all the time. And, we certainly don't want to exasperate our kids either and make them do this on everything. However, I think this is a really good way to be able to help them focus, help them pay a little more attention. And I mean, this is great for adults too. I do it. That's actually what started me on this. So in the Well-Trained Mind, they really want you to be kind of asking questions when you are reading through like a literature book or a history book or whatever. And so I just took it one step further because I kind of was looking at several bookmaking books over the summer, and just made me think, well, why don't we just turn it into a fun little booklet? So you could do that, or you can just put it on paper and put it into your kids' binders throughout the year. But I kind of like this idea, and at the end of the year, just taking each subject, or when we're done with the book, taking the book and actually, sewing up the seams and actually putting on a book cover and kind of making their own little books. So kind of a fun thing. The other thing that you can do too is I found at Learning Palace, they actually just have like booklets kind of like this size with the plastic, a little bit nicer. For, gosh, I think they were like $2, so really not too expensive. So you could do that too, just to give it a little more official look or whatever. But anyways, just to get started, so I kind of do these when I just started doing it with reading the Bible. I felt convicted to read the Bible from the beginning to the end and just really know what was in it, not just read it and how sometimes we get distracted and things happen, thoughts come in your mind. And that happens to me all the time whenever I'm reading the Bible, but this time to actually pay a little more attention. So I started this booklet for that. Also in reading, more difficult secular history books, particularly one of them that I was reading was about the Mesopotamian era. And if I hadn't been a little more vigilant and I hadn't had my dictionary out and just making this booklet, kind of writing down what was going on and stuff like that, I would have missed a lot of key things that they were telling me. Particularly when they talked about, there were things that they couldn't really write off as not happening. Like they couldn't write off the fact that Noah's ark had happened when the flood and all that. But yet they basically said in very intelligent words, I guess, they were kind of stretching their intelligent muscles or showing them off. They basically said that, they don't want to use the Bible, but they will use it as a reference, but they don't necessarily believe it that way. So they have some theories, but they can't exactly prove it. So, I mean, really they were beating around the bush in a very intellectual way. So if I hadn't had that out, I wouldn't have caught a lot of that stuff. I would have gotten the gist of the book and probably would have gotten bored with the book too, because I didn't really totally understand what they were saying. So I thought it was a pretty cool thing to do. It is, it's a little more thinking and a little more challenging, but we're going to get stuff like that in life, and we need to be prepared and ready to do stuff like that. So then the other thing is like watching documentaries. I do these with a documentary, especially because a lot of times, I mean, we all know in media, they always have some kind of angle that they're coming at you with. And, just recently I was watching a documentary about the Great Pyramid, and it was very clear that this guy, the scientific expert, had an agenda. He wanted to prove basically that slaves did not build Egypt, and if I hadn't watched this with a more vigilant mind, asking questions and really thinking through what he was trying to prove, what he used to prove it, I might not have caught the fact that he really actually didn't prove anything. By the time he got done, he showed us some evidence, he showed us some things, but one way or another, it actually didn't prove which way. So I'm glad that I did that. Anyways, so moving on, I just wanted to show you. So for the Bible, what I basically did is I did this, oops, upside down. I did this book. I started this in Genesis, obviously, because I wrote Genesis on it. And then I just kind of went along. Now, for older kids, you can actually have them go ahead and write out the scripture. And you don't have to do this for every chapter of the Bible. I just did it on the ones that it was very clear that we could write things. Like when they're building the temple, or Doing a family tree for the genealogy that they give would be awesome, because it kind of just puts it into context a little bit better. And those ones are the ones that we fall asleep during anyways, but they actually historically are pretty darn important, because it really kind of gives us more of a timeline of how things happen. And later on in life, when we're studying like the Bible and more history and things like that, we will have a more firm idea of time, just by doing stuff like that. So anyways, that's just my thoughts on those. But what I did is then I also drew. So this is fun for kids, you know, to be able to draw. And, you know, younger kids, just have them use the whole page, draw, and then maybe put day 1, God created, you know, light and darkness. And, you know, then use the next page. And day 2, you know, he created the heavens and the earth, or the atmosphere. Some just call it the atmosphere. So I went through and just kind of drew, and I did different things for different ones. This one was creating the land, the difference between the land and the water, and yeah, it's just my own drawing, no big deal. You know, and then I actually used 2 pages for him creating the stars and the planets and the sky, and I just looked up some things and references and kind of tried to draw it the best that I could, and it was really fun. So just, you know, I went all the way through creation, and I'll do some more. It's my first one, so I haven't done that many yet, but it was really cool. So then the next one that I did, I actually don't have in front of me, but I'll kind of just use this one and pretend, is I took the book that I was telling you about, which was the secular history book, and I did a timeline on the front. I put the title of the book, and then I did a timeline. And I just went through. They were actually comparing biblical timelines to, or Israel, they called it Israel timeline, to the Mesopotamian timeline. So I went ahead and put everything that they had on there on the timeline. And even in the timeline, I found that I was looking up vocabulary, because there were several things that they put in there that it was just kind of like, okay, you know, that's kind of a funny way of saying that. And honestly, a lot of times it just meant a simple word. And I was like, why did they just put the more simple word on there? So that, you know, again, they were trying to either confuse or just show off. I don't know which, but and then I just went in and I just started right in. So I'll probably create, like, I haven't actually finished that one either, but I've started it. What I did is I started vocabulary, and I'm just going to do a full-on, just like you would a glossaries in other books, you know, at the back. So eventually this will be the back, but I did my vocabulary starting with the timeline and just went right down, you know, in the introduction, just kept going, and then I'll do a whole nother sheet to be able to put a couple of sentences about each chapter. And you can do this at the end of each chapter, or you can do it at the end of each book, but I would highly suggest, of course, for each chapter you want to put just a couple of sentences about what the chapter was about. But then the part that you could do then, or you could do later, is just to ask yourself, well, do I believe what they're saying in this? If you want, you know, how does this line up with the Bible? How, especially the timelines, the history, all of that stuff, is really good to just kind of ask those questions. And, you know, what are they trying to get across here? What, is there an agenda? There might be, there might not be. I mean, it doesn't always have to be an agenda, but usually there is. So and then the last one, I was talking about documentaries, and again, I just did the same thing. Took a sheet of paper, folded it in half, and I put the title of the documentary, and then the questions that I asked for the documentary were very similar to the questions that I asked for, like, the secular history book. And so I asked things like, you know, what was it that they showed us in the documentary? Then I asked, well, what were they trying to prove? What evidence did they use to try and prove it? Did they prove it? Why or why not? And more importantly, do I believe what they were trying to get across? So I think that's really good to do for any documentary. And you may believe parts of it and not believe other parts of it. You know, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, obviously, I believe that they built a pyramid. It's there. But do I think that slaves built it? Absolutely, because the Bible tells me that they did. And, you know, everything that he showed didn't necessarily prove one way or another. In fact, looking at the evidence through my Bible glasses, I actually think that he proved that it was. So you got to just look at it that way, and you just got to ask questions. The other thing that you can do these for is literature, which we haven't done yet, but we will, because we're going to be reading Alice Through the Looking Glass, and of course that's such a fun book to be able to draw pictures and put poems in. She's got a lot of poetry, or he's got a lot of poetry in that. Sorry, Lewis Carroll would be a he. You know, so there's so much. And the other thing that you could do is, you know, even before you read the book, a lot of times we're supposed to be reading about the author and their life and find out what context, you know, this was written in. So that could be a great front page thing to do, and then just go into the book. And, you know, so there's a lot that you can do. And at the end, you could have the kids summarize, or you could have them summarize at the end of each chapter, which I highly suggest, because that also helps them to keep things in chronological order in their head. And then after the book is done, then they can write, you know, a couple of paragraphs about what it's about, using the notes that they've taken from each chapter. But have them draw pictures. There's so many fun creatures and lots of fun poetry and all kinds of stuff in there. So that's a really fun one to be doing for literature. And if as we get that done, I'll probably do a little video and show those off, so because they're going to be a lot of fun. So anyways, just wanted to send out this quick video. They always tend to be about 10 minutes. That's about how long my answers are when you ask me a question. So but that way you have something to look at. So all right, I hope that helps. Talk to you later. Bye.